So here's a tweet from before the U.S. midterms from September. We're into September 2018. But this applies to 2020 as well. I patiently await the U.S. midterms and all the people online carefully explaining to me just how evil I really am. For my gender and my skin color. But the very same people will dub me a racist and a sexist. What a world, huh? So, we're still seeing this. In fact, we've seen a whole lot more of it since the 2018 U.S. midterm elections closed. In fact, 2019 has been the year of just anybody with a mundane political view being called a racist, or a sexist, or a bigot, a misogynist, a xenophobe. They'll come up with all these different words because you want something as basic as, a border wall. You want to have a nation state. You want laws. You want to have a welfare state. And they'll say, these are all just constructs. It's all just a construct. Yeah. Your country is a construct. Your ability to succeed, your positive liberty, your negative liberty, these things came through laws. They didn't just come out of thin air. We had to bring order to the chaos in the United States, but they'll just dub you whatever it is. They'll say, you said something like this, you're an otherist. You're a malevolent otherist. You're a racist. You're a sexist. You hate these kind of people, those kind of people. And I say, what are you trying to do here? Like, I'm an independent voter. Are you trying to win me over? Like, are you trying to proselytize to get me in the door, to get me to vote, to make me feel guilty, to make me feel shame, and then get me to vote the way you want me to? Is that the idea? Because all you're doing is making me go, I don't think that you people that are using identity politics and calling everybody racist should have any more power. You're already misusing the lack of power you have. Like, you have the power of free speech, you have the power of freedom of association, freedom of assembly. But of course that doesn't mean, getting on your combat gear, getting on your brass knuckles, pulling on your plus-size combat vest and helmet, and going out and enacting violence on people that you disagree with. That isn't free speech. I do support the right of groups like Antifa and the Proud Boys and all these different groups. May they be, supremacist groups or, the bad guys, the bad hombres in my book. The people that we say are like ethno-nats or all these sort of unsavory figures. I do support their right to association. I do support the right for somebody like a group like Antifa to organize. But of course they want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to say, we're not really an organization. We don't have a list of people. We don't have any sort of group structure. They do get some donations indirectly through the Open Society Foundation. But, and they do have the media, of course, doing a lot of moral cover for them, saying that it's okay for them to hit people over the head with a billy club and so forth. But, I do support their right to speech and their right to association and assembly. But, of course, wearing masks, running through the street, and hitting people that may be innocent but have, mundane right-wing views. They might be wearing a red hat you don't like. But it doesn't mean that they're, a supremacist or a nationalist or any sort of identitarian group. They're not necessarily a social justice disciple, social justice warrior, another identitarian group in the modern religion of social justice, intersectionality, identity politics, social Marxism, cultural Marxism, collectivism, however you'd like to put it. That's identitarian too. And I don't want those identitarians being punched. I don't want those identitarians being punched. And I want to allow them to speak. Because the bad ideas will sink to the bottom. When somebody won't stop talking about how white males are bad, that tends to sink to the bottom. And because they're so echo-chambered and they have the algorithm directing them, the social justice disciples, they get into a space where, They think more of the world agrees with them than it actually does. And actually, people at large in the political discussion overestimate the population size of these identitarian groups. May it be your neo-Nazis, or may it be your Antifa. But I've had people say to me also, it is kind of funny. People will throw me on a list. They'll say, you're a sexist, you're a racist. For what? I don't know. Like, they never tell me. But they'll throw me on a list. And then I have people that are like, I'll make a shit post. And again, I said, a shit post is not, it is not an intellectual exercise. I'll make a shit post that kind of refers sort of maybe to Antifa, but doesn't quite say. And they'll say, why aren't you pointing to the other side? And I'm like, the other side is very clearly, if they're violent, I don't support violence. I don't support domestic violence. I don't support political violence. I don't even consider Antifa and the Proud Boys to be really political groups. They're more of groups of thugs that get together and wail on each other. That, in my view, that matches more with my philosophy on what these groups entail. But, I don't want there to be violence. I don't want there to be any more incitement to violence. I don't want there to be any more journalists getting hurt, any more civilians getting hurt. But people will say, like, why aren't you pointing out Antifa when you're pointing out neo-Nazis and white supremacists and black nationalists and all these bad guys over here? Bad. In my opinion, and probably yours, we'll call them bad, and some people might get on me. If you don't like that I'm calling identitarians bad, leave me a comment below. But I'll say they're these bad hombres, as society dictates. And they'll say, well, why aren't you talking about Antifa? And I'm like, I don't need to talk about Antifa every time I'm talking about these Nazis over here. And I don't need to be talking about Nazis every time I want to talk about Antifa. It's not all this hypocrisy game. We just condemn violence. We condemn violence. All right? And I condemn racism. And I condemn sexism. I don't like it. We all have a little bit of otherism in us through in-group preference. I am 25% Syrian Lebanese, but I am largely, white. I'm largely Irish, Polish. I'm largely white. So I do have in-group preference. I do understand white culture better than I understand most other cultures, if all other cultures. Because I'm white. I don't have to be this way. I can have more out-group and I can improve my knowledge, and that'd be awesome. But it's not because I'm bigoted. It's just because this is the culture that I am most familiar with. Okay? As a male, I relate to males more. I love females. I love everybody. But I understand better than anybody males because I've lived that experience. I've had the testosterone. I've had the adrenaline. I've had all these chemicals, all these thought processes go through my head. I look at it, and women know it too. They look at another woman, and they immediately know. They know, like, they've been there. They've done that to some degree. To some degree. These common things that bring us together. And one of them is bigotry. One of them is racism and sexism. We're all a little racist. We're all a little sexist. We all have a little in-group preference. It's almost impossible to get rid of. And the best we can do is try to manage it and not be assholes to one another. Be excellent to one another. That's what Bill and Ted used to say. So I patiently await the U.S. 2020 presidential election and all the people online carefully explaining to me just how evil I really am for my gender and my skin color. But the very same people will dub me a racist and a sexist. Look, if you look at the world through a race lens or a sex or gender lens, if you look at it through a religious lens or an occupational lens, or what associations or groups somebody is a part of, or the people they talk to, you're going to have a bad time. Because we are all human beings. We are all made equal. We all have our own individual liberty, responsibility, and agency. We have choice. We have freedom. We have liberty. And we have systems. We have meritocracy. Now, I'm not talking about idiocracy. I'm not talking about reverse meritocracy, when you reward people for bad behavior and they give you more because they have been incentivized to do so. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about crony capitalism or nepotism, as Jaden Smith is well aware. His new album, out now. Nepotism, Jaden Smith. I'm not talking about that. Well, when I'm talking about capitalism, I'm not talking about the vertical monopolies or the digital cartels that hold our speech behind a gate. They gatekeep through the social media platforms and their sort of nebulous terms of service. I'm not talking about people that are corrupted, where absolute power corrupted their thought process. I'm talking about meritocracy. You know, you do the right thing, you get kudos. If you do the wrong thing, you get criticism. And if you did something that has mixed results, you give some, in my world, this is the best way to go. You give your accolades first, and then you give the criticism. You say, good job, you did a great job here, but here's how you can improve. You know, and that's optional, of course. But if you want things to get better, of course, you do have to communicate. You can't just live in the culture of nice. You have to tell them, here's what you did wrong. Here's where you can improve. Give them constructive criticism. But these same people, they have to be told they are being racist. They are being identitarian. Antifa, running through the streets, the social justice disciples that cast the oppressor and the oppressed, the people that run around and say, you are your group. You're not the individual. You're the group. You're part of this bigger thing. And we're going to look at you through that lens. Here are your victim points. You're disabled. Here are some victim points. Your arbitrary, immutable characteristics, like, you know, despite the fact that whites are the minority in the world, they are the majority in the United States. So in the context of the United States, the social justice modern religion tends to work better for achieving what they want, the equality outcomes, the equity outcomes, which of course are part of the axiom they turn towards, the God they turn towards, you know, this sort of like, you know, equality and equity. But they don't realize that there are a lot of other factors that go into why there is a female wage gap or any of these other things. But they'll call me all these things, and I don't look at people as their race or their sex. Like, I appreciate those parts of somebody. Like, I understand that, like, you know, I value my culture. I value other people's cultures. But I don't look at them and go, well, this person's being treated this way because of their skin tone, their race, their sex, their gender, their belief system, whatever it might be. You know, whatever label somebody's given them. I don't look at them that way. I look at what they're saying. I listen to what they're saying. I think that's the better way to go. You know, and I want to reduce the amount of violence. Okay, I don't want to take sides and have to mention right-wing terrorism, which is real and dangerous. We have to work on. In fact, the first person being executed under the death penalty, which I don't agree with. I do not agree with the death penalty, but the first person being executed in about 20 years is a white nationalist, white supremacist. So, you know, we understand these ideologies can create immense evil. They can create immense evil, but we can't get too bogged down in constantly bringing them up and pointing to them. Okay, we do need to point out what we don't like. You know, we can point out if we see something in the world that is immoral, and it can be really, truly harmful if somebody's doing something like incitement to violence or doxing or any of these things. You do want to point it out. You do want to tell your police officers and whoever might be in charge. But people do, again, you don't want to be an absolutist when it comes to authority. You don't want to be somebody that goes around and just puts people on lists and labels them and casts them aside and says, oh, we're just going to report you and blah, blah, blah because you have a mundane political opinion we disagree with. That's not going to create unity. That's going to create division, which is what we already have. You know, there's no scarcity in division, but what's scarce, what's valuable is the diminishing center. We want to build the center back up and get people back on the same page together. And of course, not in a tiny echo chamber or a tiny Overton window, but a larger one, a larger range of acceptable dialogue. That's why I say, We need an Internet Bill of Rights. We need to allow people the full range of dialogue and discussion. And if people want to block, they want to mute, they want to kick people out of their household and say, show them the door, as the XKCD comic says, they can do that personally. But the person being completely excommunicated, deplatformed, depersoned, demonetized, debanked, all of these things, divested from, we don't want to create a world where you have wrongthink and then the thought police come along and say, well, we're going to get rid of your life. You're done in the society. Like, that creates the real extremism. That creates victims. People that see themselves as the victim. And they go ahead and they feel oppressed. They feel entitled to fight back. And if they have dangerous ideologies and they fight back, they get into their smaller, more contained echo chamber after you've banned them from every site. They get in that small space and then they go ahead and it gets more concentrated. The hate, whatever dissent they have, gets more concentrated. They should be allowed into the full dialogue, the full conversation. Whoever they might be. Doesn't matter if it's left or right. Doesn't matter. No violence, no more censorship, no more prophets of the modern religion censorship telling you what you can and can't say. It's just not the way this country was formed. Okay? No matter how limited your interpretation of the Bill of Rights may be.